Hi, everyone. We'll just give a few seconds for everyone to connect to audio.
And while we're just waiting to get started, if everyone wants to post in the chat their names and where they're joining us from, that would be wonderful.
Okay, it looks like the majority of participants so far have connected to audio. So we want to thank you all for joining us today at our session, specifically on ESD in curricula. We're very, very excited for this session and really to get involved and dive deep into this topic. And we hope it's extremely useful for all of you as you're thinking about doing workshops in your school community, mapping your curriculum, or even if you've been working with the SDGs and sustainable development for a long time in your schools. So thank you so much for making the time today. And I'm glad to have everyone on this session. I'm going to take the opportunity just to introduce our wonderful speaker, and we are extremely appreciative that he's here giving us the time in his busy semester, because Professor Öztürk is truly an expert when it comes to teacher training, not only in Turkey on ESD, but across the rest of the world. So we're very, very grateful to have him here sharing some of his expertise with the Global Schools community. So just a little bit about him before I give him the floor. Dr. Mustafa Öztürk is an associate professor of curriculum and instruction at Boğaziçi University, I hope I said that right, in Istanbul, and an international research fellow at the Center for Sustainable Futures at Teachers College in Columbia University. He holds a BA, MSc, and PhD from Middle East Technical University in Anarka, and he completed postgraduate studies in learning environments, and educational systems at the University of Turku, Finland, and peace and conflict studies at Chulalongkorn University in Thailand. He conducted postdoctoral research at Teachers College in Columbia University, specifically on sustainability competencies in teacher education. He also has received a variety of awards. He was a recipient of the 2021 Rotary Peace Fellowship and also received a Human Development Research Award. His international projects span across borders on sustainability, environmental education, social inclusion, inclusive education, and special education. Right now, his focus is really in designing, implementing, and evaluating continuous teacher professional development programs for teachers in Turkey. We're proud to say that he also led the Global Schools research work as a country director for our pilot programs in Turkey, which we're also extremely grateful and proud of that work as well. So I will turn it over to Professor Öztürk to lead us through the session today and give us a bit of an overview of what we're going to be doing together.
That our music, that Papa Billy's music.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you so much for this nice introduction. I'm just looking at the participants. We have around, I think, over 60 participants today with us. That's very a good and huge number, actually. So actually, I was planning to do this session as a workshop, but it won't be so practical. So that's why it's going to be now more like a webinar, more like a knowledge sharing, and of course we will have some discussions together, but it won't be a really exercise. Maybe in other platforms we can also do some exercise of curriculum mapping, curriculum objective writing. Here I will just provide my own experiences, and I will start with some concepts, some theoretical background behind ESD integration into curriculum, and then some sample examples that I myself tried to include. So we can start if there is no issue, concern, or question before we start. Okay. So let me share my screen with you. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so integrating ESD into curriculum is the thing that today I will be discussing with you. And mainly our framework will be the UNESCO's guidebook, UNESCO's framework, UNESCO's source books, because ESD is a very general thing to discuss actually, and there are so many perspectives about ESD. But here I just wanted to limit it to a pedagogical sphere so that we can just look from one main or major framework so that we can move on. So ESD in UNESCO's source book is defined as a vision actually, or as a pedagogical approach, sometimes as a intergenerational, interregional, international thing, but at the same time it is also a very local thing, including both global perspectives and local issues in it. ESD does not belong to a single discipline. So this is what we actually embrace in ESD. And it could be adopted by every teacher in every discipline. So no matter what the teaching field is, we are focusing on ESD from a transdisciplinary perspective. So when we have this perspective while designing our curriculum, we will go through a different path. But if we just look at from a very disciplined perspective, or a monodiscipline or single discipline perspective, we could we could be losing our own path. ESD should be comprehensively integrated into curriculum. What do we mean by comprehensively? There are so many different aspects and dimensions of ESD, and basically, conceptually, or as pillars of sustainable development, we are looking at ESD. Personally, I also look at ESD from both environmental, social, cultural, and economic perspectives. And ESD should be supported and enabled by educational decision makers. So here, there are a lot of stakeholders of educational sphere, in this process. But here, basically, if we are focusing on the curriculum field, decision makers are both teachers as curriculum developers and teachers as curriculum implementers or practitioners. So how do we adopt this ESD integration into curriculum? There are basically 4 areas that we need to focus on while integrating ESD into curriculum. The first thing is, of course, the content, learning content. When we integrate sustainability issues such as climate change or other themes in SDGs into our curriculum, first thing that we usually focus on is our content. But sometimes this content area is taking too much place of our curriculum, and then we can just miss other dimensions. What are the other dimensions? You see here on my screen. The second dimension is the learning outcome. With learning outcomes in the ESD curriculum, we are aiming to empower young people to take responsibility for both present and future generations, and actively contribute to the societal transformation. So we have a vision there, we have a mission there, we have a goal, we have a purpose there. But in every curriculum, our learning outcomes target a societal transformation for the sake of, or on the side of, ESD, or futuristic perspective of ESD. And another dimension that we should also focus on is teaching method. Teaching method is the way that we follow while we are just teaching those content, that learning, the content, also the themes or topics in SDGs. So here we should employ interactive, interdisciplinary, project-based, contextualized, learner-centered pedagogy, and there is a variety of pedagogies that we should follow while we are instructing, or while we are teaching this ESD in our classes. But here, just a very major samples of teaching methods. And of course, we should also look at the learning environment. We should reflect the vision also on our learning environment. When I say learning environment, I mean all physical, social, psychological environment of learning, or environment in which the learning takes place. So here, we cannot only focus on our classes or our own classrooms, which is really not limited to the content and the method and the learner and the teacher. The learning environment is far beyond the classroom environment, actually. So when we are talking about learning environment, while integrating ESD into curriculum, we are aiming also to transform all aspects of learning environments. And we have a very famous approach here, which is a whole school approach. With whole school approach, we should reflect we should reflect the vision of ESD into all dimensions of learning environment, so that we can enable learners to live what they learn and learn what they live. So there is such a interconnected relation between these two phenomena. What they live what they learn, and learn what they live. So our learning environments also should create this link while teaching ESD. Another thing that we should also focus on is learning domains. This is a very important issue, which is also adopted by UNESCO. We have different learning domains, but throughout our research, throughout years that I was engaged in doing research on ESD curriculum in different learning settings, we see that some of the domains of learning are really taking too much place in the curriculum. I can give an example from our own curriculum. When we look at Turkish basic education curriculum from K to 12, from K to 8 levels, we also see that ESD related learning outcomes are mostly piling up within the cognitive domain. So when we just focus too much on certain domains in the curriculum, we consciously or unconsciously skip or miss the other domains, which sometimes much more important in disseminating this vision. So here we are talking about both cognitive, social, emotional, and behavioral domains. When we talk about cognitive domain, we basically mean or refer to knowledge and understanding about SDGs or ESD. When we talk about social emotional domain, we are just coming to the attitudes and attitudinal skills or values within the learning process. And when we talk about behavioral domain, we are most focusing on the application side of it, real life application and action-based or action-oriented skills. And we have an approach of a combination of all three domains, because all three domains are critical to empowering young people, also for an effective integration of ESD into curriculum. So as curriculum developers, we aim to maintain a balance of all the learning objectives across all these three domains. So sometimes seeing that the curriculum, any curriculum, national, local, regional curriculum, is focusing too much on a cognitive side or a cognitive learning domain, we feel that there is something missed, there is something skipped, omitted. And usually the feedback coming from different settings or contexts tell us that they have such a limitation in their curriculum that they give too much importance or too much emphasis on cognitive domain. But of course, while balancing all these three domains, we also focus on, skills and key competencies. The skills are always interrelated with these domains. So in cognitive domain, we have cognitive skills. In behavioral domain, we have behavioral skills. And also, there are some key competencies here. So we usually try to make our learners competent in certain areas. And we will give some examples about them. So both skills and these key competencies should be hand in hand with these cognitive, social, emotional, behavioral domains of learning. That's what we actually ideally aim to do, but while having a balance across these domains. What are the key competencies for competency-based learning for such an approach? You can see this in the UNESCO's source book. Actually, we have a list of competencies there, ranging from systems thinking to problem solving, self-awareness, critical thinking, collaboration, strategic competency, normative competency, anticipatory competency. So in our each learning activity that we design for our learners to to empower them with these capabilities, we should always keep in our minds about these key competencies. So every activity that we design in our teaching should serve to develop and improve one or more or a combination of these these competencies. So sometimes we can focus in one of them, but sometimes we can focus on a combination of two or more competencies through our learning activities. And another thing is social emotional learning. Again, I can give an example from our own curriculum, which we analyzed in 2020. This is a really recent curriculum of Turkish basic education from 2018 in K to 12 level. We see that, while we see so much attention attached to the cognitive dimension, cognitive learning within the curriculum, we also saw that the least attention was attached to or given to social emotional learning. In ESD, social emotional learning takes a very critical and crucial place, especially at earlier stages of learning, especially when we are teaching to young learners, when we are teaching to younger people, when we are teaching to youth. So we should also promote social and emotional learning through ESD integrated curriculum. What can we do while we are promoting these social emotional learning opportunities? First of all, we should teach everyday life skills. When we are designing our curriculum, we should always keep this in our mind. Everyday life skills and the connection of ESD to everyday life skills is really crucial. We should link social emotional instruction to other school activities. So sometimes we are focusing too much on in-class learning, but we can just ignore or somehow forget the other activities going on around the school. So when we link the instruction, in-class teaching, in-class activities to other school activities, we somehow enforce and foster this social emotional learning. We should use goal setting to focus our instruction. So every learning starts with a goal setting. So we should teach our kids a goal setting capability or skill. We should use various instructional procedures. And I'm sure that all the teachers, each and every teacher knows how to use a variety of, how to use a diverse range of instructional procedures to, get the attention of the learners and to motivate them to learn certain content. So here, it really depends on our teaching skills, instructional skills. We also promote community service to build empathy. Community service is a very is an inevitable component of ESD integration. When we are designing any activity for a class, we should always think about a community service that we can engage our learners into. Also, parents, again, for social learning, emotional learning, linking it with the outside of classroom. So we should consider involving parents. And of course, at every stage, we should monitor and evaluate what we do. So with these steps, we can build social emotional skills gradually and systematically. And we shouldn't forget that learning requires caring. Caring is a very important skill, a value-based skill, an attitude-based skill, actually. And when we teach caring, I think ESD issues, or all types of, critical issues that we can link to ESD requires caring by learners and teachers. So on the side of learners, we actually motivate our learners to learn, to think, to feel, and act. So all these skills should be hand in hand again. I mean, we should consider that learning cannot be without thinking, thinking cannot be without feeling, feeling cannot be without acting. So this is such a process that when we teach any content, we should always consider our learners' way of learning, thinking, and feeling and acting about that content. How are they gonna think about it? How are they gonna feel or act about this content? When we look at the teacher's side, on the side of teachers, of course, we start with teaching, but in this teaching, indeed, we have this awareness raising. We should raise awareness so that our students can think. And another thing, we should instill sensitivity so that our students can feel. And we should create behavior change so that our students can act. So learn, think, feel, and act are closely related to raising awareness, instilling sensitivity, and creating behavior change. So in each step, we are going further so that we are teaching everyday skills and linking it to the everyday life of our learners. And also, there are some key considerations that we should focus on. Actually, with a group that I'm currently working in an initiative which is called Greening Education, we are always discussing these issues, localization and contextualization issue. What do we mean by localization? In a few minutes, I will give some examples about localization. But basically, when we are localizing ESD curriculum, or let's say SDGs or ESD vision or issues, we are considering the regional and cultural circumstances. So how can we localize a universal or a global or an international framework into our local system? There, we have to consider our regional, national, local, and cultural circumstances. So on this end, we have this localization consideration. On the other hand, there are some content areas and fields of teaching that we need to consider. At the very beginning, our first principle was this: ESD is beyond disciplines. ESD is a transdisciplinary thing. So how can we contextualize these issues into a mathematics curriculum, into a science curriculum, into an English language curriculum, into preschool, into other areas, humanities, So here in contextualization, we are looking from a content area perspective and field of fields of teaching. But at this process, we have a concept or phenomenon called scientization issue. So when we are just linking ESD with some of the disciplines, we may, again, have too much scientization problem. Usually what we also discuss with our, this project group working for UNESCO, we are discussing this issue, especially in certain areas, like in many African or Eastern or Middle Eastern regions, or in South American regions, or in the global South. We hear stories like this. When young people see that there's too much scientization in it, they turn off and they think that it is not for them to learn. This is also something valid for my own society or for my own culture. When we think something from a very scientized perspective or from a very scientific perspective, some populations feel that it is not for them. So they just keep a distance between the issue and them, and they just like, I don't know how to explain it, but it could be a kind of stereotype, it could be a kind of prejudice. They block their learning. So we should also consider not to make ESD too much a scientific issue for some people. Of course, there is science in it, but we are not mainstreaming it as a science. We should consider this point. We have global values and we have local realities. So global values and local realities should be hand in hand in this process. When we are focusing too much on global values, sometimes we can, skip these local realities, and we can create some ambiguity in it. With some of my examples, I would like to try. I could try to make it, more concrete, maybe. But at this point, the biggest challenge of teachers in the local or in the region or in the national settings to localize those global values. Some values may not have a sound, position in the local environment, some global values, as much as in other environments. So we should keep this in mind also while designing our learning activities. A global value which doesn't have much connection with the local culture or local community may create some, unattention by kids. They may not give their full attention to this issue while learning, in the classroom. How can we do this? We will give some examples of it, but from localization to contextualization, considering both global and local realities, we have different priorities and realities that we need to consider. When I'm giving the whole process, starting from the SDG, starting from an SDG theme till creating a learning outcome, I will try to draw the pathway for you. But here there are two ends, actually, localization and contextualization, and we should take it into the center of these global values and local realities. So local values will feed global values, will feed local realities, and local realities will feed global values, so that we could localize the process as well as we can contextualize it. This diagram may be helpful to just picture, just to portray what I mean. So where do we start? This is actually the step that we follow while we are just trying to, create a curriculum guidance for UNESCO. But this is also what we also adopt or embrace while designing national curriculum or national programs here. The first step is deciding on key concepts. Key concepts. What do I mean by key concepts? You can think any concept within the SDGs, or you can focus on those 17 SDGs and pick up certain concepts from there, or look, you can just take it from environmental, social, cultural, or economic perspective. But here, the thing that will be guiding us will be basically SDG-based concepts and SDG-based thematic areas there. So now you can consider and take notes about what key concept should I include into my curriculum, my instructional planning process. When we decide on the key concept, then we are just narrowing down it to different key topics. So think that we have chosen one of the SDGs, SDG 17, SDG 11, SDG 12, whatever. And within that key concept, we can create certain key topics based on those SDGs, those specific selected SDG. And in the key concept, in the key topics, we shouldn't forget, again, global values and local realities. So we should always keep in our minds that how can I link these global values related to SDG blah blah with the local realities of my own region or my nation, my country, my culture. And then the further step is key ideas. Based on each key topic, we need to create certain key ideas. This is how UNESCO usually suggest us, and how it makes the process more practical and more systematic. So in key ideas, I personally focus on sociocultural priorities and sociopolitical dynamics of the local curriculum. So, there are a variety of issues, hot topics or hot issues in certain parts of the world, while they don't have that much attention or popularity or that much priority or importance in other parts of the world. Or some of the things happening nowadays in this region could be an outdated thing in another region of the world. So here, my focus will be sociocultural priorities within the community that I live in and sociopolitical dynamics there. Sometimes priorities could be, prevented by sociopolitical dynamics. For example, I can give an example, the gender issue. I can give gender issue as an example. So when you consider this issue on a specific community in one part of the world, it could be a very, prioritized issue, but it may not be it could be a very fragile thing in another part of the world. So their sociopolitical dynamics also should be considered, so that we can design our curriculum. Then the next step is about the level. So we are deciding on the age groups, and here we are focusing on different groups of learners, like preschool learners before 6 years old kids, and 6 to 8, 8 to 12, 12 to 15, 16 to 18, and 18 plus. And here our main basis will be the developmental psychology, of course. When we are designing a class and finding an instructional strategy and setting a goal or target for a young learner will be, of course, quite different than with an adolescent or with a young adult learner. And of course, as I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, these domains are really important: cognitive, behavioral, social, emotional domains. And this knowledge and understanding area, attitude and value area, and action and application area should be considered with a balance. And finally, we come up with the learning outcomes. While we are deciding on the learning outcomes, our guidance or our framework could be, as an example, Bloom's taxonomy. And here again, we should always consider the thing that I again mentioned a few minutes ago: learners' capacity to learn, to think, to feel, and to act. So again, like in the domain section, we should also consider the balance between thinking, feeling, and acting. So we don't want our kids only to learn and think. We want them to feel it and act it. So that's why we should have such a balance. Now I will provide some examples, some sample, samples from my own work. But this work is for UNESCO, so it is not published yet. So please, I should mention that do not take these samples and disseminate anywhere. These are still draft work, so I just wanted to give an example to provide you a concrete sample what I'm doing while designing a curriculum guidance. But as I mentioned, this is still a work going on. So please do not take it and disseminate in different platforms, because it is not finalized yet. And as a draft, I don't want it to be disseminated. Soon or later, you will already have them after we finish the whole process. Before summer or during summer, you will also get those things. The first one is a sample for 6 to 8 years old kids. And the key topic here is responsible consuming or consumption, let's say. While I am just sharing this, I want you to think it from two different regions. I don't know if there are any participants from these two countries, but while I am sharing this key idea and learning outcome with you, please consider a kid in the United Arab Emirates, let's say in Dubai or Abu Dhabi, and at the same time think a kid in Ethiopia, so that you can just imagine what I mean by localizing and contextualizing. You can also consider your own teaching field while looking at this sample. You may not be knowledgeable about these countries, but it doesn't need to be a very deep general knowledge for this exercise. Just think about them and imagine a kid in both of these countries while reading this. So this is my key idea. Material possessions never provide us with a lifetime of happiness, and they only create happiness for a short period of time and eventually fade away. And here you can just read the learning outcomes for different domains. And you can also focus on the domains here while reading the learning outcomes that I expect learners to be able to do at the end of this, let's say, to any lesson, any session, based on this key idea and learning outcomes. Think about a typical UAE kid living in Dubai and a typical kid living in Ethiopia, and think about the possession issue in terms of from their perspectives. So how would you localize this key idea into those two different contexts? Just, you can take notes and you can, ask questions. When I finish my presentation, I would like to get your, reflections and maybe critical perspectives about this. here, sometimes, you know, the key idea is a very ESD oriented key idea. The key idea is reflecting the vision of sustainability here. But when you think about a poor kid who is really sacrificing or so many stuff in his or her daily life while surviving or while trying to find food, how would he or she, you know, perceive or conceive this key idea, and how a teacher working there could realize these learning outcomes? This is a very, you know, critical question. My second example is about waste practices. This is from 9 to 12 years old age group, and the topic, as I said, waste practices like recycling and other practices, sustainable practices. And here, while you're doing this, please consider again Mexico and Canada. How can you, you know, localize to different settings, like in the previous sample? Here is the key idea. Sustainable waste practices aim to minimize the amount of solid waste that is disposed of in landfills or through incineration. So please read the learning outcomes again and consider the waste practices in Mexico and waste practices in Canada, and how, you know, how update is it? How valid is it? How, you know, urgent is it? How prior is it? Just I would like to take it into your you know, consideration. We can discuss about that in discussion part at the end. My third example is about sustainable mobility. This is from 13 to 15 years old age group. And here, while thinking about this key topic, please consider a kid who is walking like hours to reach school, walking for kilometers to reach school in Nepal, and the kid in the USA. And how can we realize this, these learning outcomes in our teaching as a teacher working either in Nepal or in, you know, USA? So key idea is this: walking as a form of sustainable mobility is a safe, comfortable, and healthy practice to adopt within a community. And look at the third learning outcome, the behavioral action-based, application-based outcome. Conduct a walkability assessment and evaluate the outcomes. So consider the kid who is walking for kilometers to reach the school and in Nepal, and the other kids in other parts of the world. So how can I, you know, promote this walking in a in a community in which walking is already a huge burden on people or kids? My fourth sample is about water use. Here, while this is from high school level, let's say, and it is I just wanted to put here Mauritania and Turkey. Please consider these two countries, or if you know anything about these two countries. And my key idea is about water leaks. Water leaks can come from many sources and all need different types of care and responsibility. And here you see 4 learning outcomes, which is related to key idea here. And again, at the end, you see an application-based learning outcome, which is conducting an assessment of water waste and evaluate the outcome of water leaks in their living spaces. Here, think about a kid who doesn't have any fountain around or any water at home, and whose mother is walking again kilometers in Mauritania to find a bottle of water, and they carry waters on their heads. Just think about that image, and think about the kid in Mauritania, and think about that this is your curriculum that you need to teach in the kids. So you're talking about water leaks there, where there is no water around them. The only water source is mothers or women who are just walking for kilometers and bringing bottles of waters with them, and also other contexts. And my last example is from biodiversity and wildlife. Here, I have two different, again, contexts to consider, to imagine in your minds: Norway and Yemen. Please, while reading this, it is maybe young adults level, we can call it 18 plus years at a university level, or young adults, or adult learners in the lifelong learning institutions. You can consider this learning outcomes. Just compare these two contexts or settings from the perspective of biodiversity and wildlife. Now I will just try to make it more concrete again. So what is the key idea that I included here? Nature and biodiversity are necessary for humankind to build stronger, more resilient societies that can respond to the challenges of today and tomorrow. So here we are just trying to instilling the sensitivity to biodiversity, and we are just creating this awareness about wildlife and biodiversity in young adults through different teaching activities. But consider an average young adult in Norway, and another average young adult in Yemen. I can make it more specific through this example. In Yemen, in one of the regions of Yemen, think about a father who is attending this, let's say, lifelong learning institution to get some training about from some international organizations, let's say. But he is in a miserable situation to feed his family, and the only way that he could feed his family is a lake which is nearby, because there is no other way to go and find food or somehow other things to feed his or to his family. And the only way is to go to the lake, fish, and bring those fish to their kids to feed them. And you are talking about the biodiversity and reserving or preserving the biodiversity in the lakes, on the land, in the water, below water, whatever. And there's also another risk there. That father, that young adult or adult learner, if he moves to another part of the region to get food, he has the risk of being killed, because there is conflict going on there, and he cannot move. They are in a very limited part, and if he just leaves that area, he might be killed. So the only way for him to find food is to go to that lake and then bring food to his family. So this was the last example that I wanted to share. I'm talking about a very challenging issue here. Localizing is not that much easy. When we talk about the social welfare, economic issues, when we talk about the other political dynamics between the global north and the global south, or between the east and the west. So sometimes you know, we are talking about as educators a very trendy, a very popular, a very, you know, valid topic, and we are very excited, enthusiastic to share it within different local settings or contents. And when we go there, we feel that, oh, we just, you know, somehow bump into a wall, which is a kind of realization. And that wall is really built on by different sociopolitical priorities, dynamics and sociocultural priorities happening in those regions. So as a teacher working in different, vulnerable, fragile settings, it is really hard to do this. And there is not a very simple way of doing this. It's always in our, you know, attitude, in our imagination, in our commitment to localize it. So while why did I want to give these examples? Because sometimes it is the easiest way is to choose the content, take it into your classroom, and share it with the kids. But we should consider beyond content. We should consider beyond, you know, those concepts and key ideas. Sometimes a very critical, important, essential key idea may not find the right attention or priority in certain settings. That's what I wanted to share with you. Now, I don't know, I took so much time of you and all the time speaking. Now I'm stopping sharing my screen. Now I would like to get your comments or discussions or questions, if you have any, if I can answer. Please feel free.
Thank you so much, Professor, for the presentation and for taking us through all of the ESD frameworks and how to really put this in our curricula. So if anyone has questions, you can feel free to post those in the chat, or I cannot see everyone on my screen. You can also raise your hand and we'll do a 15-minute question and answer session. Is that okay with you for the timing, Professor?
Yes.
Okay.
I want to mention this. I mean, I was not able to follow the chat, and there are like around 80 messages. I'm sorry, but I hope you have checked them and you will help me not to miss anything.
Yes, I'll start. There's one question in the chat so far from Marty, and I will also scroll up to see if there are others. But from Marty, she's at a school in Austria. So the question is, what happens in an international school setting where children and students might come from many parts of the world?
To be honest, I don't have I don't have any empirical research from international schools. But years ago, I have been teaching as a practitioner teacher, or as a part of my, you know, internship in Finland. I was teaching in an international school, but at the time I was not that much knowledgeable or, you know, that much interested in ESD. It was years and years ago. But I remember that the dynamics within an international school is really shaped by the kids themselves, because they are coming from very different areas to those schools and they are representing diversity. So they have such a balance already. I mean, they already guide you to talk about certain issues, to discuss certain issues, you know, considering a homogeneous, you know, school. I mean, compared to a homogeneous school, in an international school, sometimes it is easier to go and find those balance, because kids are already guiding you or directing you, somehow leading you to discuss certain issues. There are also some, you know, especially about conflict issues, when you are dealing with conflicting some controversial points, when you include it into your teaching there might be different aspects there. But what my observations, I mean, from years ago was this: they really know how to live together. They already adopted the vision of living together, and they have this empathy already, and they know what's happening on some parts of the world at first hand from their own friends and peers in that school, and that's really helpful. That's really helpful at that point.
Yeah, thank you so much for that answer. And others can feel free to respond to each other in the chat and share your knowledge. Of course, we have a lot of knowledge in this Zoom room. So there's two more questions. One is, can you tell us a little bit more about the whole of school approach that was mentioned kind of towards the beginning of your presentation and contextualizing teaching via the whole of school approach? And the second question is, how would you start ESD for preschool students, so early childhood, and kind of taking these concepts to that level of education? Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let me start with the first question. In whole school approach, I mean, if they also search on, on internet, they will find a lot of resources about it. It's also called as whole institution approach as well. In whole school approach, curriculum is something beyond an official document. When we describe the curriculum, there are visible dimensions of curriculum and there are invisible dimensions of a curriculum. So when we talk about curriculum, we talk about educational policies, first of all. We talk about educational philosophy. And then we talk about the aims, objectives, goals. Then we talk about the content, and we talk about the evaluation procedures. So as a whole school approach, I can give an example from, again, from my own context. There are some societies where if you don't test what you teach, that teaching cannot find a place or a long-lasting influence on in the system or on learners. So sometimes integrating into this evaluation and assessment procedures, integrating an issue into evaluation and assessment procedures really helps a lot. So here I can give an example of PISA, modules. In PISA since 2016, 2006, there is a module on environmental aspect, and nowadays it's becoming more like global citizenship, sustainability, climate module. So in that module, kids are tested based on their, environmental activism, sensitivity, pro-environmental behaviors, both in their private sphere and at their school. They are also asked for policies. And this is a very powerful dynamic within the education, because when you put that into an assessment procedure, people take it more serious. I don't want to portray a very test-driven or assessment-driven perspective or approach here, but to be honest, and unfortunately, they have a power there. So when I talk about whole school approach, for example, if you we include content, we include learning outcomes, we include learning objectives and activities through ESD integration, but we don't test it, we don't evaluate it, we don't include it in assessment procedures. So in a whole school approach, assessment procedures is a very important point there. So through project-based assignments or through experiential learning assignments, we can just engage learners into this process as a whole school, within a whole school approach. Another dimension is learning environment. So think that you have a school which is not sustainable at any aspect, but you are trying to teach ESD. On the other side, think of a school which is we can define it as a green school, which is using, the rainwater, which is using the, solar energy, which is sustainably managing itself. There are some policies, just at the moment you enter the corridor of a school, you feel that yes, this is a sustainable school, this is a eco school, ecological school, this is a green school, whatever you call, and then the classrooms or all other learning environments reflected. That's a part of whole school approach. So if you adopt the whole school approach, you should engage this ESD vision into all of the dynamics within the school. So if you just miss one part of it, like if you don't reflect it into school policy, if you don't reflect it into assessment policy, if you don't reflect it into design policy, this universal design for learning is a very critical issue nowadays that we can also discuss about it. If you don't reflected into teacher development, teacher initiatives, teacher autonomy, so whole school approach cannot be achieved. I mean, basically, while we are talking about whole school approach, we are talking about all of the dynamics within the school, including teachers, exams, examinations, curriculum, policies, classrooms, learning, design of learning environments, everything. And for the second question, so can you please repeat it again? It was about preschool, but what was the focus of the question?
Yes, it was, I believe, how to start out introducing these concepts and ESD, thinking about learners at the preschool level, early childhood. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, again, I would like to share this ecological sensitivity. There are so many studies showing that ecological sensitivity within the younger kids are really high, and even higher than the adults, because they start with this identity formation as well as just comprehending and understanding what's happening around them. There, I can just give two significant suggestions or advice to teachers. Sometimes when we are putting too much emphasis on ecological sensitivity, that can create eco-anxiety within the kids. And I feel really sorry that when the younger kids feel too much anxious, about the ecological things happening around the world, about this carbon emission issues, about this environmental degradation, so many stuff, climate. So sometimes we are just putting them in a position to save the world, which is, somehow destroyed by the current generation. So the blame is not on the long. I mean, I don't want to blame anyone, but the blame is not their blame, actually, if there is a blame. Sometimes when we put too much emphasis and pressure in preschool kids about the environmental issues, it really creates some eco-anxiety. And I just want to take attention of teachers to that issue. We should be very cautious about it. And it really, at that age, it is really a big problem for them. They may not handle with it. They may not cope with it. So please keep that in mind while designing your activities. But as strategies, practical things, experiential learning and outdoor learning really helps, because kids really like learning in the nature. So if you adopt an outdoor learning approach into your everyday activities, instructional activities, that will really help them. Just take them and explore the environment with them, and let them experience it, and let them benefit the experiential learning. That is really powerful as a starting point. I would give this as an example.
Yes, thank you so much for answering those questions. There are a lot of questions in the chat about if we will share the presentation or recording. We usually always share the recording with the Global Schools Network. So please sign up for the newsletter, which is on the bottom of our homepage. And we will work with Professor Öztürk to see what is the best way to share different materials from the session and how exactly he would like to follow up with everyone here. I think we have time for potentially one more round of questions. Is that okay with you, Professor?
Yes. By
Okay.
the way, I will share my email address. You can also share my contact information so that if they have further things to discuss, or if they want to contact me or, somehow interact with me, they can always write to me. This is my institutional email address, and you can also share my personal address with them. Because I
Okay.
have seen some people wanted to connect with me through different, platforms. They can just use my email to reach me.
Wonderful. So everyone, as you can see, he has put his email address into the chat. So please use that to connect with him on future projects, very specific and detailed questions about the learning outcomes. I see there was some about kind of the cognitive behavioral domains and that sort of thing. So those questions we can send right to the professor. We'll do maybe one more question here. Let's see, I'm scrolling up. So there's a question from Hakima. So she's from Afghanistan, and as you know, Afghan girls have not been able to go to school because they've been banned. So just broadening this a little bit, for students that can't go to school and are in conflict areas, in your opinion, what does that mean for the SDG agenda and ESD? That's a hard question.
It's a really hard question. It's really beyond the curriculum. It's a very, broad question. Yeah, there are some, international organizations already planning to, take this issue into more concrete steps. Yeah, I don't know. There, at that point, I really don't know the facilities there. How can they connect through different, platforms? So I'm sure that global schools are doing a lot of work about these online materials, learning online classes, courses for people who have no access to, education. And also the other, I also know that I can mention about them if there is no problem about it. Save the Children International is doing a lot of work for girls who cannot access education. UNICEF is doing a lot of work about the girls who cannot reach education. So I would suggest teachers working there to somehow connect with those institutions, including SDSN, global schools, those institutions, so that they can provide some materials, some, links, some networks for them. But other than that, actually, this is a really, really big issue. Thank you for raising this into this discussion, and we shouldn't forget, of course, such fragile, such vulnerable cases. Yeah, this is a very I mean, it's a very vulnerable thing, area like in Yemen, like in Palestine now, what's happening. So when we consider their priorities, sometimes what we are discussing has no, place in their day, in their daily life. That is, maybe we should consider also those vulnerabilities also, I mean, within this process. But the only thing that can heal all these problems is connection, is collaboration, is solidarity, I mean, at this point.
Thank you so much for your insights on students that are having difficulties accessing school or in specific situations. So thank you, Professor, so much for your time, for giving this wonderful presentation. As I mentioned, all the attendees of this webinar will get further follow-up information from this session, whether it is the recording and certain aspects of the presentation that Professor Öztürk would like to share with us. Before we log off, I would like to take a quick picture of everyone here as usual. So if everyone that is able to would please turn on their cameras and we'll take one picture together. Okay, there are 4 screens of lovely faces. So this is the first one, everyone. 1, 2, 3. Oh, wait, sorry, give me 1 second. Okay, I'm starting over. 1, 2, 3. All right, here's the second screen. 1, 2, 3. Here is the third one. And the fourth one. Okay, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you for your time and being together with us for this professional development session. We will have another session on the Friday, October 27th, I believe. That is that Friday that week. And this session will be led by a Global Schools Network member from the Philippines. He does a lot of amazing work on connecting his school to UNESCO. He's a UNESCO youth delegate. And this topic will be on connecting your school to the community and thinking about how to make community partnerships. So we'll really be excited to see you on that next session on October 27th. So please check out for the registration link for that on our social media and in our newsletter. And if you are an advocate in this current cohort, please remember the next KPIs will be coming out on October 20th. So please check your email. And as always, Kendra and I and the rest of the team are just an email away. So please reach out to us with anything that you might need. So we hope you have a great rest of your day and evening wherever you are in the world, and we will see you on the next session. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
It's